Alrighty, welcome to another Boardvengers video. Today we have a panel of some awesome people here to talk about how to get your friends into heavier games. And so that can mean two things depending on where you are in your gaming journey. So that can mean, how can you get your friends to get in and start playing hobby games, which we'll touch on. And then we'll also touch on, you have some friends that, play some of the entry level hobby games that you see at like a Target, right? And nothing wrong with that. I love those games, right? Like you got Azul and like Catan, but like how do you get them to play? Like I see Anachrony over Roberto's shoulder. Like how do you get your friends to dive into something that's 4 hours long? So those are kind of the two paths that we're going to be talking about tonight, and I'm pretty excited about it. And I've got two awesome people on with me. So hello, Roberto. Hello, Professor Meg or Shear Boardom. How are you all?
I thought Meg was gonna take it. Doing great.
Hairball. just pass. Watch it go by. It's fine. Yeah. We'll pick it up next time.
Yeah. All right. Yes. Second down. You want to try that one more time?
Oh man.
No, I'm doing great. It's always wonderful to do one of these, and just it's almost like hanging out with my friends virtually. We're gonna have a wonderful discussion. You pose that question, and the first thing that comes to my mind is that meme where it's you don't. How do you get someone to play Anachrony? ... You don't.
It has a solo mode, and that yeah. Nice. How are you doing, Meg?
I don't know why, but this already feels like Boardvengers after hours. Like Roberto's got the lighting, and I feel like I guess no secret to everybody, we're recording a little late tonight, so I think we're all just like in a good mood. Yep. I am so happy to be talking heavy games. That's the thing I love. If we can solve the question of how to get more people to play heavy games, let's do it. I'm here for it.
Yeah, really, this is actually just we're making this video to ask people to play with us. That's actually, I mean, it's not going to be that long of a video. Just please play games with us is really what we're saying here. No.
That's it. End of video.
I think it was maybe at least a year ago that I asked Roberto to set up and play on Mars with me, and we haven't yet. So
I played on Mars with Roberto.
You taught me how to play on Mars, via Zoom of all things.
That was difficult, rewarding, and I would never do it again.
Understandably so.
Yeah, it's definitely a better in-person game than trying to manage an overhead camera and moving a rover around Mars. So, oh man,
we did it, and it was a little daunting, but it worked out.
I mean, like I had a little bit of this throughout the day. I think like Smalls had, or my wife, who we were playing a 4-player game, and I think my wife ended up with as many points as the other three of us combined. So. Nice. It was a good game.
Nice. True victory.
True victory right there, yeah. Achievement unlocked. Yeah. Alrighty, so let's dive into it. Let's talk about how to get some of your friends that may not have experienced hobby games, how to get them into that. Because like I think the stigma is going away a little bit, right? Like, when I would tell people I played board games 10 years ago, they're like, oh, cool. Like, I'm not going to talk to this guy, right? And I think that's going away, right? Our industry is growing rapidly, which is an amazing thing, right? We have so many new games. You can walk down an aisle of Target and see Gloomhaven on the shelf, right? So it's kind of a time where I never thought we would be at. And so I think, approaching people, like having game nights and everything, is becoming a lot more commonplace. And so there are people out there that haven't been able to experience this wonderful hobby, and so I wanted to kind of talk about how do we get people to play some of the hobby games, right? It's not Monopoly, it's not I don't know, sorry, or like a party game like Wits and Wagers, right? Like something that is fairly commonplace, that is a very fun game to play, but like maybe we want to get them to step into Azul or like Red Rising, right? I mean, I think it's a fairly approachable game, especially if you like the IP. And so just, like, I guess, Meg, how have you had success in bringing friends into playing some of these types of games?
I think especially through the years, one of my favorite games for this and I feel like I preach about this game so much, is Ascension. And that's because Ascension, there's the base game and it starts off pretty simple, and the rules aren't too complex. But then after that, there are expansions and things that by the end, you can add so many things to it with energy shards and multi-classing and multi-uniting that you can kind of show someone how big board games can get with one IP. So I really love Ascension, and I think it's really, really well developed, that it plays very smoothly. It's a really, really great game. Another game that I love to show people is Small World.
Yes.
I think it's the tiles are really fun, and it's very tactile, and it's a big board, and it's very skirmishy, but like it feels okay because you can kind of kill yourself instead, and it's still worth something in the end. I really love that one. Both of those are ones that I have a ton of expansions for, because it's something that has hit my table with all different kinds of people.
Right. Yeah, Small World was actually one of my gateway games, right? So like I played Dominion forever, and then I realized that there were more games out there. And Small World was one that I bought off of just like I heard a sentence about it. I'm like, well, that sounds hilarious. And I think that really helps bring people in. It's like I can be the, marauding halflings, right? Like that's a combination, and it's just kind of exciting and weird. And it's like, oh, let's see what this is. And I think that, we're kind of getting into a gateway game discussion, right? Like how to do that. But I love both of those. Just like theme really grabs you. Roberto, what kind of success have you had?
When I talk about getting people more into games, I kind of talk components first, because I think a lot of people know what poker chips are, dice, a board, cards, whatever.
Right.
So a lot of my go-to games that I tell people are probably going to be at Target. First of all, Target's been stepping up their game.
Yes, they have.
No pun intended there. But Splendor is one of my go-to ones because it's so approachable. You get the gems, the poker chips, and the cards, and I can teach someone that in 10 seconds, really. You grab the gems and you play a card, and then that produces. So the way that you can teach that and the way it plays, it's super streamlined. And it breaks the mold of, okay, a Monopoly board, let me just go around and around and around and around and around. So this is completely different from that. The other one that I talk about as well is Ticket to Ride. Back to, you have your board, those pieces, right? That's instantly recognizable, little cards. But even though it's a board, it's not you're going around and around or any of that stuff. You're have to strategize as to holding the different colored tickets and placing the trains out and making sure you can get from A to B, right? And I absolutely love talking about those for people who want to come into the hobby, because they look at these components and they say, oh, I've seen that before.
Yeah. And so I think something that's fun about all four games that we just mentioned is that the rule sets in our eyes are fairly light, right? They're pretty approachable games, and there really isn't a lot of randomness to them, right? I think a lot of like the Monopolies, a lot of the games that we grew up with have like dice rolls, and there's not those strategic or not those tactical decisions, and you get to implement those in a very like small way, and people. I think it's a very rewarding experience for people when they're able to make a decision that pays off, and those games amplify that, because they're, again, talking from like a very heavy game perspective, that they're not a lot of decisions in those games, but there's way more than some of the games that we grew up with, and they get rewarded very quickly. Like Splendor, you're able to very quickly cash in and get those victory points, and it's a very like instant gratification that shows off, hey, my strategic decision meant something. And I think that's pretty rewarding for people. So okay, but I think really the meat of this, or what I wanted to get together and talk about, is like, we have played Splendor with these people now. We have played Small World, Ticket to Ride. Those have hit our table. Let's get them to something big. Let's get them to play Anachrony. Let's get them to play Dwellings. Let's get them to play something like deep. Spend more than 2 hours on a game. Like, I want someone to come over to my house and play and spend a Saturday playing a game, right? So these heavier games. So we have talked about on our podcast a what we do is kind of give a stepping stones into heavier games. So if we're doing like a game analysis for Gaia Project, which we haven't done, but typically we'll start out that episode by saying, if you haven't played Gaia Project, here are some games that can kind of get you there, right? Yeah. This introduces the drafting mechanic. This game introduces this mechanic. And I think that that is a long con, basically, to get people to play the game. But that's kind of something that we have found that works pretty well, is a lot of those games that we've been talking about, like Ticket to Ride or, Set Collection, right? That introduces Set Collection, and teaching games to gamers is a lot easier, because it's like, this is like this from Dominion, this is like this from Ascension, right? It's deck building, and that's all you have to do. And so providing those stepping stones has really been beneficial. In theory, I guess. I don't know if I've ever actually done it. So with that caveat, but how do you all get people to dive in and play these awesome games with you?
I think you make a great point there, because there are only a finite amount of mechanics, right? Anachrony at its heart is a worker placement game. Granted, there's a lot more involved. But you take a dude, you put him out into the world, or you have a dude in your little city, and then you place him into the action. Like that is all Anachrony really is at its core. So if I can explain something like that, as well as being passionate about playing Anachrony, because I love playing Anachrony. This game is awesome. Yeah. If I'm passionate and I just strip it down to the bare, hey, this plays like this plays like this. When I get Dwellings out, it's the same thing. Hey, but I think everything in Dwellings is stripped down to its core base anyway, of the set collection and a worker placement, resource management. It's like the most simplified version of everything that there is. But as far as because that one I don't think is as heavy as Anachrony, probably not, but those games on Mars, I think it's passion, it's a mindset, and then explaining to your crew that, hey, this game plays like this, and a little bit of this, and a lot like this, but minus this, divided by this times 5.
You lost me there, but I trust you.
Yes.
Yeah, having those games to rely on, saying, hey, this is like Ticket to Ride in this sense, except with this twist. And I think that is also pretty exciting to people, right? Like, especially if they've played Ticket to Ride 5 times or however many times, and I like this game. So let's change it up a little bit. And so I really like that. Meg, what have you been doing? Or how have you brought people in?
I think the biggest difference between bringing like non-really gamers just into the gamer scene versus people into heavy gaming, I think the games that we mentioned earlier, they're all ones that are also very accessible, like visually, that it's easy for people to just quickly put it together, and they can, especially like Ticket to Ride. I love that game. And that's something that you can really easily look through the board and see what you need to do. And with heavy games, that's so difficult. Like, you need player aids and things like that. So I've talked about this a couple of times, but my very first board game was Arkham Horror, and I love it. And that's probably, one of the heaviest games not one of the heaviest, but in my collection. That it was introduced to me really great through a friend, that we try to make the environment really engaging as much as you can, with like music or whatnot, and trying to close out distractions. And it's always better if someone can just kind of hand you the game. I think that co-op is really better to kind of walk someone through that, because you can be on the same team and kind of make them feel like you're helping them through without trying to help your own agenda. So I don't know, it was just such a lovely experience that's what made me fall in love with gaming. I've had a harder time getting people into heavy games. It's not my strong suit. The friends that are into it, I feel that they're just into it. That at least a tactic that we use to be able to play heavier games together. Shameless shout out to Rodney and Watch It Played, but we love watching videos ahead of time. So it's really great that if we're going to play a heavy game, I have a little group that will try to learn the game earlier. That really helps. Fun components help to really engage you. Once you're at that point, you're really into that stuff. But yeah, I've had a hard time getting people into something as heavy as Gloomhaven, I've been able to bring one friend into it. So it is tough. It's really hard. But I think things like miniatures can really do it, or showing them things like sticker components, things like that. I guess maybe it is a component quality, but
I think components help a lot. Yeah. And I really like your point about co-op, right? Because there are co-op games out there that introduce a lot of these mechanics, and it's it's kind of nice and friendly to play the game and succeed together, right? Like Spirit Island is a very heavy cooperative game that I've had success bringing players into. And I think another kind of thing to say here is that the heavier it is, the harder it's going to be to bring people in, which seems obvious, but I think it needs to be stated. And I think if you're trying to get people there, what you need to do is know the game very well. You need to understand where they are sitting. And like I know I don't know if I talked with you all specifically, but there's the concept of like heads up or heads down gaming, right? Where heads down, like you're playing your faction, you're doing your thing. Heads up is, it's not the best for me, but taking down this person so that it's actually net best for me, right? So that, I mean, that's like the next level of play. You have to be at that level. You don't want to do that with a new player. You don't want to just completely cripple them, but you need to understand where they are and how to help them set up for their turn. And one of the things that Dalton does really well is that the co-host of Fantasy and Some Flights is that whenever he's teaching a game, he understands the different actions that are available. And he doesn't say like, because you'll be asked the question so many times when you're teaching a new game, what do I do? And the answer should never be, this is what you do. The answer should be, here are your options. And I think that goes a long way. And understanding that you don't want to just beat someone into the ground on their first play, which is why I think a cooperative game makes a really great recommendation for getting people in there, seeing how exciting these games can really be. I like that a lot. So, but yeah, so.
And to your credit, Nelson, you've walked me through Marvel Champions a lot with a lot of grace, that you've let me make my own decisions, and kind of, because I've even kind of asked like, well, what should I do? I want your expertise. And you're like, this would be really good. So I'll tell you what I'm feeling, but you've definitely, I don't know, guided me through the game without telling me how to play. And I think that's what's important. And it's almost becoming like a game master at that point, to be able to run the game for the sake of the game without your own agenda attached to it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And that is a really good point. Like if you're able to run the game, I really like how you said that. Yeah. If you're able to, understand and facilitate so that people can have their fun time. Like we're organizing a game on through Fantasy and Some Flights where like Dalton's favorite game of all time is Twilight Imperium, but I don't want to play Twilight Imperium with him because I will never win, and it's just like whatever. And so what they're doing is there's about 3 people that are pretty close that are really good, and we're gonna set up a beginner's game where they're gonna act as like coaches, right? So they're gonna float and talk to us about strategy, but not be like partial to one person. So they'll be able to help out anyone. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's the very far extreme side of things. But if you can do that for players, it really goes a long way.
Yeah, making sure the game front to back is that's so key. I ended up teaching Anachrony in October to 2 newcomers, and the teaching it took a lot out of me, and then playing it, of course, was after a whole stretch of a weekend of playing board games. But after finished playing that game, I was just toast. After teaching it, playing it, and telling people the other 2 that I had taught the options of, hey, you can go this, go do that, do this, do that, because I was playing all these, their game, my game. So mentally, I wasn't prepared for that scenario. Yeah. But they absolutely enjoyed playing the game. I mean, it took us 3 hours to play, but at the end, they enjoyed the game and they would play it again. And the next time that we play, I'd probably have to relearn some of the rules, but I'd know 90% of the rules, and I've played the game maybe 10 times, and I still have to refer back to those rules because the rule set there's a lot going on there.
Yeah. And that's a really good point, and it reminds me of something. I think the last thing, at least I want to say, like, well, we can talk however long we want, but the last thing that I wanted to say is that I have fallen into the trap of not realizing how complex games can be, right?
Yeah.
For us, like, Anachrony is a heavy game, but Red Rising, I think, is a pretty simple game. But if you put Red Rising in front of somebody who has never played a board game in their life, there's a lot going on. And
Right.
you can very quickly have just as much of a bad experience trying to teach someone the game. And it's like, oh, I would never say that, but like, you should pick this up pretty easily. And
Yeah.
I've made that mistake where and it's hard to bring people back from that, right? Like, oh, this is a light game. You probably don't want to ever say that,
Yeah.
right? Because then if
Yeah.
they don't get it, then it feels negative. It's a negative connotation. So understand
It's a 2.2 on BGG.
Yeah,
What
come
could
on,
go
man.
wrong?
Yeah, pretty much. And like, games are rated by gamers, so a 2.2 could be very light to someone who's played a lot of those games, but
Yeah.
could be pretty. It's a lot for someone who has never played a game. So that, I mean, and you know your friends, your people that you're playing with, and so you can make that judgment call. But I've made that mistake, and so I want to warn people that is a mistake that can be made and can be pretty detrimental and kind of almost ward off people from wanting to play more games with you. So don't recommend that.
Yeah. Who has friends who don't want to play board games anyway? I cut all these people out of my life a long time ago.
That's smart. Like, how? I'm gonna take a note. Where's my notepad? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree that can sometimes happen. That's something I started as a TCG player, and with Pokemon, there are a lot of different decks, and they were called meta decks. So you would play, what was popular, and there were some that I just could not play, and there were others that other people couldn't play, and it was something we learned pretty quickly that it's like some things just don't click with some people, and it can feel detrimental. That, like, for example, I've never won Azul. I win most games in my house. I have never won Azul. So some games like just don't make sense with some brains how they work. That usually what I try to say instead is it will feel familiar. So if it's something that is an easier game or a lighter game, but it has mechanics that tie back to the games we mentioned in the beginning, like Monopoly or things like that, I'll try to say what it feels familiar to instead, to be like, hey, this will feel good to you, instead of this should be easy.
Yeah. Great point. Also, me and you need to play Azul, and one of us will get our first win, so it'll be great.
No, I'd have to play Azul with her
that.
so I can beat Meg. Every time I go and play games with her, she's always wins.
Yeah. No, I think Dan's won too. He surprises you. The thing that my husband will do is he'll say, I'm not going to win, and then all of a sudden do it.
Yeah, that's true.
Please, the meek person. Oh no, woe is me. I'm so far behind.
Yeah.
Got him.
He's faking it.
Nice. Excellent. Well, this was a wonderful discussion. I hope that this helps you bring people into the hobby, bring people into playing some more of the heavier games or the hobby games that we love, right? You're watching this video, which means you probably like board games, or at least I hope you do, or else, like, also, if you don't, leave a comment why you're watching this video, because now I'm really curious. But but yeah, so also, if we didn't cover something, or if you agree with something, leave a comment below. And what methods do you use? What tactics have you employed that have been successful in bringing people into some of the heavier games? Because it's really exciting to play these games. We know that, you know that, and so help us help everyone else find this amazing hobby. So it was great talking with you all, and thanks. See you around.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.